WNST. We're doing double duty all week long. And, we've talked a lot of Ravens around here, and certainly the loss to the Bears and getting ready for the Vikings. We'll get back to all of that. But Luke Jones and I are going to nerd out here because we're the two last guys still watching Major League Baseball at this point. Dude, let's start with this. The damn Yankees, right? I mean, you saw this thing sort of slipping away on Tuesday afternoon for the Astros. It felt like the ghosts from across the street of Tino Martinez and Jorge Posada were there. Just a legitimate meltdown by the Astros, and now you have to wonder whether they're going to be able to pick themselves back up here in Game 5.
Well, we'll see. Keep in mind, they have two guys named Dallas Keuchel and Justin Verlander looming over the next couple games, and that's why the Yankees needed to win Game 4 and give them a lot of credit. I mean, they rallied. They were down 4-0. I mean, Starlin Castro kicking the ball around. I mean, it was looking bleak. It was looking like they were going to be down 3-1 with Keuchel going to the hill on Wednesday afternoon, and lo and behold, the Houston bullpen showed up, and this is the reason why the Astros were trying to get Zach Britton at the trade deadline, because they really, other than Giles, and it's not as though he was great on Tuesday, they really don't have a whole lot of arms in that bullpen they can trust right now. So, I mean, this was the formula for the Yankees. You knew you were going to deal with Keuchel and Verlander. The thought of having to beat both of them was going to be very, very challenging. So they come back to their home stadium, which is all you've been hearing is how loud it is. Everyone's saying it sounds like the old stadium, so they've gotten a pick-me-up from that. But they needed to win these two games to get themselves back in the series, and they were certainly able to do that by way of a Houston bullpen who couldn't get anyone out in the 7th and 8th inning. Just a really, really good series, and yes, the Yankees have the momentum, but as I said, those two pitchers going for the Astros are going to make this series all that much more enticing over these, what easily in my mind is looking more and more like a 7-game series.
He is Luke Jones. He's Baltimore Luke at on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. We can go backwards into the game and into the pitching matchups and where we are, but the other series, we can probably sum that up pretty quickly, right? Like, the Cubs are in a world of hurt with Jake Arrieta heading to the hill this evening and down 3-0 at this point. The Dodgers have been that good all year long. I know they took their little slumber in September toward the end of the year, but they look poised to go back to a World Series here now.
Yeah, I mean, that team won 104 games. And keep in mind, they don't have Seager at shortstop.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about an MVP caliber kind of player who hasn't been available in the NLCS, and yet they've still done this. I mean, their bullpen's been outstanding.
Their pitching's been outstanding. 4 games, 3 runs for the Cubs, period.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's been incredible to see until Ross Stripling gave up a couple singles in the 8th, late in the game. It was their bullpen had completely shut down the Cubs. Darvish was terrific. They've gotten nice contributions from the two guys filling in at shortstop, and it's just been one of those things where, as much as the Cubs had the pedigree of winning last year, they had the emotion of getting through that Washington series. You think about how much that may have taken a toll on them, and specifically, we talked about Wade Davis not pitching in Game 2 and all the controversy there. I mean, the Cubs haven't hit, and their bullpen's been bad. I mean,
and it's cold in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, you do the math. I mean, that's a combination that's going to leave you down 3-0. And I would say I'm surprised, but I'm not, because we saw that bullpen was really running on fumes against the Nationals, and Wade Davis did great work in the 5th game there to get them through, to get them to advance. But that I think I don't know if I said it to you before the series started or after Game 1, and I kind of said I wouldn't be surprised if the Dodgers sweep them, because I think the Dodgers are the better team anyway. Certainly,
and they were all year long. I mean, the Cubs scuffled for various reasons all year long. I don't think we should be shocked by this, but taking out the Nationals, that wouldn't have shocked me either. If you'd have given me a nickel on that series, I would have bet on the Cubs. But hey, I liked the Red Sox 2 weeks ago, and they, no one went to sleep quicker than they did. So, at this point, it looks like the Cubs are tired and down, 0-3. This, it feels really insurmountable, right, when you're down 0-3.
Oh, sure. I mean, unless you're the 2004 Red Sox, I mean, it is over. I mean, I guess if you look at it, Alex Wood against Jake Arrieta, I mean, they might be able to win a game here. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to necessarily say it's over as in they're going to be swept, but the thought that they have to win another game just to get back, to try to even send this series back to L.A., I mean, they got to win 2 more games. So
the World Series would start in L.A., though, right? I mean, they would be the higher seed, correct? So Tuesday and Wednesday would be games 1 and 2, and then it would either be in New York or Houston over the weekend. And right now, who could bet on Houston right now? Like, after watching, and I know it's a momentum thing, but, you're wondering, okay, the Dodgers are going to get in, great. Now who's going to be there? Boy, I remember the 77 and the 78 World Series. I remember the 81 split season World Series and Dave Winfield, Mr. May, and all that stuff. I guess for anybody my age, Dodgers, Yankees, feels like it happens every year, and it hasn't happened in 35 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long. I mean, the Dodgers haven't been to the World Series in 30 years, 29 years. I mean, it's you think back to Kirk Gibson against Dennis Eckersley.
I remember where I was that night. That was a great night there. Now that was one of the most dramatic things and I know they still play it 30 years later. Like in my lifetime, when I think of things that I watched live that seemed like the most unlikely thing. I mean, the guy coming in the parachute in Vegas during the fight, okay. Biting an ear, okay. Anything involving Roddy Piper or Jimmy Snuka, okay. But I'm talking about like, in my formative years of sports, the NC State Valvano thing was one of those like moments if you were watching it live. But I don't know that there's anything that really compares to the Gibson home run in that era, in the 1980s, for baseball, for drama, for the whole natural, part of it. And to see that sort of get reenacted a little bit by Turner the other night was kind of interesting. And, now we're going to have the sun setting. We're going to have World Series games played in daylight, right? Because the games could start 8 o'clock. The sun's going to be set. That's going to be a nice thing next week, I think, when the Dodgers get into the World Series. And I'm going to wear my Dodger hat. There you go. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those cases, and we talk about this all the time. We talked about it with the Orioles a few years back. Just because you're the best team during the regular season or you're the team that had the better record doesn't mean that you win in October. I mean, a lot of it comes down to who's playing better at the right time. I mean, Houston was better than the Yankees in the regular season, but we'll see what happens now. It's down to a 3-game series, essentially, with it being tied 2-2. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. So in this case where you have the Dodgers, who were the best team in the NL, who for a while were on an absolutely historic pace before they ran into some trouble, which I think was probably natural when you had the kind of lead that they had in the NL West. But the thought of them being back in it, you mentioned Gibson, that's one of those moments that holds up. I mean, some of these highlights you see over and over and over again that it kind of loses its magic. But that's one where you still watch that and you say, man, that's incredible when you consider all the circumstances, how awesome Eckersley was at that point, how banged up Gibson was at that point, how the A's were considered such a Goliath, and for the Dodgers to do that, it is cool to think about L.A. being back in the World Series. And, as far as Yankees-Dodgers potentially, I mean, just even go back further than the L.A.-New York thing, the Dodgers, and I get it, it's Brooklyn compared to L.A., but so much Yankee-Dodger history in the history of this game. Go back to the 40s and 50s. I mean, it's pretty cool to think that we could be talking about all that, but don't count out the Astros, and I'd still much rather see, from a fan interest standpoint, I'd rather see Houston against L.A. when you're talking about an Astros team that's never won the World Series and a Dodgers team that hasn't won it in 29 years.
Astros-Dodgers sounds like the NLCS 1980 to me. All it makes me do is think of, like, Jose Cruz and Nolan Ryan and J.R. Richard, honestly. Terry Poole.
It is weird because, the Astros have been in the AL for a few years now, but it's funny. I still have this reaction when I hear the Orioles are playing the Astros I still somehow get in the back of my mind that we're going to see the pitchers batting. And then I think, oh, that's right. They're in the AL.
Imagine how weird it is to be an Astros fan, right?
Sure.
I mean, I guess at some point, like if they ever threw the Ravens in the NFC East, we'd say, okay, we'll get used to playing the Eagles and the Giants and the and it would be okay, but it would never be normal, right? I mean, my dad really struggled with that when the Colts moved to the AFL in his mind.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like my dad never thought that was normal, you know what I mean? And everybody always thought the AFL was beneath them. But for the Astros to have 45 years, I mean, the Brewers did it. I mean, and I'm still, it's taken me 20 years to get used to the Brewers being in the National League, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been 20 years for them. I think it's different when you make it to the World Series, though. I mean, it's one thing to kind of talk about, okay, well, we realize the Astros are in the AL, but the thought that they could be playing the Dodgers in the World Series, that is a little different. Just like we know the Brewers are in the NL, but if they make a World Series at some point, that would be a little bit different. Although,
how can you let a team in a World Series? There's nobody from the American League. Oh, yeah, there is. Okay.
Right, right. So I mean, it's the momentum's on New York side now, no doubt about it. But at the same time, don't sleep on Houston here. I mean, they have two amazing pitchers going to the Hill. They're going to play the final 2 games of this series in their ballpark. It's just I'm looking forward to some great theater. I mean, that's been a really good series. But the issues with Houston, I mean, their bullpen, and they really haven't hit the ball other than Altuve. I mean, it's they really have struggled. I mean, even their 2 wins, they scored 2 runs in those games. So they're definitely feeling the pressure now. And this Yankees team that was a wild card, they're ahead of schedule. I think most people out there didn't really think that they were a favorite to make the playoffs. Certainly, people thought they'd be in the mix. But most people thought they were another year away, and now they're 2 wins away from the World Series. It's a sobering thought for the rest of the AL East, certainly, but it's been kind of fun to watch a young team. This is a more you still hate the Yankees because of the Yankees, but other than Aroldis Chapman, I think this is actually a pretty likable Yankees team.
Yeah, I can't hate on Aaron Judge. I mean, right? I mean, what's the hate about him, right?
I mean, Didi Gregorius.
Give me a little time. I remember when I used to root for Tom Brady 20 years ago and thought, oh, that's cute. The Patriots are going to win. Nice. Good for them.
And then they win 5 more times.
Screw the Raiders. I don't like them anyway, right?
Right. I mean, that's, I'm sure we'll all be hating this Yankees group soon enough. But for right now, there's a little bit of charm there, and they've got some likable guys on that team. But that said, still rooting for Houston to win, and still not counting out the Astros, even though this series now locked at 2 apiece.
He is Luke Jones. He's Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. All right, so I'm going to mix a wrestling reference into this, right? So if I say to you I'm about to have a shoot interview with you, what would that indicate?
That means you're going to talk real for a moment.
Buck Showalter to the Phillies, Luke Jones. What say you?
I mean, Peter Angelos wouldn't let Dan Duquette go to the Blue Jays a couple of years ago. I mean,
it's almost laughable, right? Like unless the old man's in a coma and I don't know about it, that's certainly possible, or not involved anymore because he's, just of that age where he's not really running the place anymore. I don't believe that, and I would believe that the only way that would happen, that John Angelos and Lou Angelos and Mama Angelos would sell off Buck Showalter to the Gypsies in Philadelphia, would be if Peter G. Angelos were not available on that day. There's just no way that would happen. No way.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see it. Unless the Phillies want to give them something unbelievable in return, some amazing prospects.
Ryan Howard, Jimmy. Oh, that's right. They're not around anymore.
You're about 7 years too late for that. But I mean, I understand some of the connections there, certainly, in Philadelphia.
I mean, I can understand why you would want to hire a manager than Buck's available in 12 months. And Buck clearly, if this winds up on Peter's desk, Buck is scratching, clawing, begging to get the hell out of here. And just the fact that it's wound up in the papers tells me that Buck is scratching, clawing, dying to get out of here. That's one thing that should be very, very clear, that if McPhail and Clintack are on the phone trying to make it happen, that Buck doesn't want to be here anymore. And that's a fact. Or Buck's leveraging the old man to get a 5-year deal, right?
But a lot of this has been speculative talk. I mean, have we seen any legitimate
Dude, it's not that hard for Buck to say, I have no interest in the Phillies job. Boom. That's the end of that. I mean,
Understood,
that's the way you handle that.
But you have to remember, some of these reports were just coming from Philadelphia that are just complete speculation. I mean, you and I can speculate about the next Orioles manager. That doesn't mean it's news. I'm not buying that Buck's scratching and clawing to get out of here. I'm not.
Really? Okay.
No.
Wow.
No,
okay.
I'm not. I mean, that's not to say that won't change in the next, in the next 12 months. But I've never gotten the sense because Buck Showalter could just walk away if he wanted to. I mean, he doesn't need this job. I mean, this guy had a comfy job at ESPN that he could go back to tomorrow.
But he couldn't win a World Series there, though. He couldn't win a World Series there, though.
Well, okay.
Dude, you're around him a lot. Dude, he's been nice and pleasant and likable and all that stuff here. That guy's got one hell of a fire burning underneath. He's never won.
Sure. I understand that. But again, I mean, we're talking about...
And he ain't going to win here, by the way. They're not winning the World Series here next year.
Well,
he knows that.
He's not winning the World Series in Philadelphia anytime soon. They've done nothing to look like they're on the cusp of winning the World Series. So why would he go there if that's the ultimate motivation?
I mean, this is a pretty dysfunctional place. I don't know if you've heard that or not.
Well, but the Phillies haven't done anything the last few years. I mean, you're making it sound like the Phillies are the Yankees right now. I mean, they got to prove that they're on the right track. And I
bet they're willing to pay Buck twice what he's making here, maybe 3 times.
But you keep contradicting yourself. You're saying he wants to win the World Series, and why the heck would he go to the Phillies then?
I think anything that creates interest around him is probably good for him with, 6 months left on a leash, literally, right? Like, he's got 6 months of baseball left here. He can disappear till April, till February, come in April and be gone, 50 weeks from now and go manage wherever he wants. I mean, the Phillies have a need right now, right? So this is the time for them to kick the tires the next couple of weeks. And, you're a week and a half away from wanting to name your manager, right? Like, literally, when the World Series ends, you want to be ready to go with that, right?
Yeah, but again, because the Phillies want that doesn't mean Buck wants to get out of here. They're if they want to inquire in that, and again,
Buck probably either wants to get out or get a deal, right? I mean, he doesn't want to stay lame duck for the next 9 months. Maybe he does. Machado does. Machado wants to hit the market, right?
Okay, that's a different story than what you were saying before. I mean, you were implying that he hates it here and just wants to get out of here, and I've never gotten any indication that that's the case. Now, Dan Duquette, that's a different story. I mean, certainly, there's a lot of evidence supporting that, considering what played out a couple off seasons ago. But I don't get the sense that Buck hasn't enjoyed his time here whatsoever.
Well, but I think it's closer to the end than the beginning, unless he's getting a deal. And the other part of that is he never wanted out of here because they had a chance to win. Like, literally. I mean, even this year, they had a chance to win. If Tillman would have been better, if Bundy would have been, Kershaw. I'm making that up, but they had a chance. I don't know that he's going into this offseason looking at next year and saying, well, we're going to win 94 games next year, and then I'm going to get an extension, or then I'm going to become the general manager. This is a soul-searching time for him and the old man. And look, the old man's getting older, right? I mean, it's not always going to be the old man around here. This is a very, very there's a lot of things that could happen here, and Buck Showalter to the Phillies seems very not likely to me, or you, for that matter, right?
And again, I don't think it's likely because I don't think the Orioles are going to let it happen first. And second, again, I mean, everything you say about him wanting to win a World Series, then why would he want to go to Philadelphia? Wait it out a year, and who knows what job could be available as far as a team that's actually ready to win. Philadelphia, I thought this was the year that they might be, kind of inching closer to 500 and being on the cusp, where, it doesn't look like they're on schedule as much as they had hoped. So, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, there's certainly some very interesting variables that need to be addressed here. I mean, the future of Duquette, the future of Showalter, what happens with Manny Machado, Zach Britton, Adam Jones. I mean, you go down the list. I mean, and some of those things could be addressed this offseason, and it's possible that none of them are, and we're going into a year from now talking about these same things as far as what exactly is going to happen. But at this point, until I hear a legitimate report from a reputable reporter saying that there's actually some teeth to this, to me it sounds like a bunch of talk radio talk, which is fine because that's what we're doing right now. So it'll definitely be it'll be interesting. I think more so than necessarily whether the Orioles want Buck back. I think the more enticing part of this discussion is not wanting him back, but how does that fit in with Duquette or another GM?
Yeah, who's going to run the place besides Peter, right? That's the big question. Who's going to be in charge in 2020, right?
Sure. Well, there's that, and what kind of role does Buck want? I mean, he's dabbled with the thought of being in a more executive role. You and I have talked about that. I don't think he'd be particularly good in that role personally, but is there a scenario where you extend him and do you hire someone else? Is it a case where Buck has, maybe he isn't the full-blown GM, but he's the manager with some extra power than a typical manager has as far as picking the groceries? So I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting. But again, I'll go back to I think Buck has really enjoyed his time here. I think he's liked this place. I think he's had more of an ear of Peter than just about anyone that's come through this place in a long, long time. That doesn't mean he has his complete ear, but I think he's...
Well, not only that, they've won. There's been success. Other than Davey Johnson and Pat Gillick, which was, a lot of money left over from before he got here, quite frankly, that bought, the Alomars and the Palmeros. Sure. I write books on this stuff, so, there's nobody that's researched it, but it's not about the past anymore. It's not about Kansas City and the ALCS and, hitting doubles off the wall and Delman Young. Now it's, okay, what are you going to do in the future? What is this thing going to look like? And, I don't ever feel like they had much of a plan to begin with, and certainly on the pitching side of things, other than, let's go buy the next Ubaldo Jimenez or Kevin Millwood or whomever the next guy is, and let's go grow some arms here. And when the arms don't grow or the arms fall off, then what do you do with it?
Right. Yeah. Then you're stuck. But I think you're right, though. It certainly is a case where Buck or Duquette or anyone, any of these players that are free agents over the next calendar year, I think there's plenty of sentiment and thought of wanting to stay with most of those individuals, but on what terms? Is it going to be a case, if you're Buck, it might be a case of, I really would like to stay and manage for 4 or 5 more years, but what's it going to look like from a roster standpoint? Is Dan Duquette going to be back? Or are we going to go out and get someone that I can work better with? Those are legitimate questions that have to be addressed. They already should have been addressed when you're talking about the manager and the GM going into the final year of their contract next year. That's something that should have been addressed probably in the last 6 months. Certainly should be addressed this offseason. Do I think it will be? Who knows? Probably not. I will say they did extend those individuals prior to the last time around when they were going into the Buck was going into the last year of his deal. But it's certainly something that is interesting, unsettling, however you want to describe it. The Orioles have a lot of issues here to address, and that said, I'm still going to be very, very surprised if 2 weeks from now we're seeing Buck Showalter in a press conference in Philadelphia. I would be, quite frankly, stunned. I
don't know what the Vegas odds on that would be, but I'm giving it at least 40 or 50 to 1, right? Like literally, right?
Yeah. Now a year from now, maybe he is there. Maybe.
But I don't know. What would that mean for the Phillies? You're going to hire a lame duck? You're going to say you're the interim manager?
The Cubs did that before they hired Joe Madden. They had Renteria, who I believe was only there for a year, off the top of my head. They fired him, and they hired Joe Madden. If the guy...
This is it's like getting a Christmas job at Kmart back when we were kids.
Yeah,
right?
Look, and it's no disrespect meant towards any other manager, but if the guy that you have stars in your eyes looking at him, and he's the guy you want, you'll kick anyone to the curb to do it. That's just, especially a team that has the payroll and the financial flexibility that the Phillies have. They could hire a manager now, give him a 3-year deal, and actually not even do a bad job. And if they're that hell bent on getting Buck Showalter or anyone else for that matter, a year from now, but you can't get them now, and you can get them 11 months from now. You let go of the other guy and say, hey, we'll pay you, and then they'll go out and get the guy they want. So, a year from now, that wouldn't shock me. But, again, I have a hard time envisioning Peter Angelos letting Buck Showalter walk away. And, again, I still think Buck is very much open to the idea of being here for at least a few more years. But the Orioles, they need to proceed in the proper way in order to let that happen.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. He'll be on the backfields in Owings Mills. We both will. I will be in Minneapolis this weekend for all things Vikings and Ravens. And by the way, I am wearing my Dundalk High Class of 85 jacket that still miraculously fits from Shiflett and Horn right down there in Dundalk. I bought this one in 1982. Letters kind of falling off of it. We'll be at Costas on Friday night around 7 o'clock. Getting inducted into the Dundalk High Hall of Fame at 4:30. Come on over, auditorium. The game's at 6. We're going to eat some crabs, crab cakes, pit beef, beer, music, fun at Costas afterwards. I hope to see everyone's face in the place on Friday. I'm out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.